Man, that's a lot of leftover parts. Okay, welcome back. It is day 2 of the supercharger install. So today I'm hoping to, expecting to make quite a bit more progress as far as getting this thing installed. Show you where we're at, just recap. We got the car broke down. Front bumper covers off, airbox is out, battery's out, and the big one is the intake is off. So next we can work on getting the supercharger runner installed and some of the cooling lines in place. And yeah, then we can get the supercharger itself set in place, and it'll start looking like something. So I'm going to get started on that, and I'll check back in here in a few minutes when I've made some progress. Okay, that was kind of fiddly, but I got the two main coolant lines run. You can see those guys right there run down underneath next to the steering shaft and under a couple of harnesses, and they end just under the sway bar here, right in here. So yeah, that took a little bit of fiddling to get in there, but I think I got it done. Doesn't look like they're touching anything, and there's still a couple of zip ties to throw on this, and plastic protective shield to protect them against sharp edges and stuff. So I got that done. Next up, we set the supercharger runner in place and get those coolant lines attached. Alright, time for a little update. Time got away from me on that one. This was a little challenging. Got the intake runner set, or the supercharger runner set in place and bolted into place. Yeah, that was tough. So there's two 10mm bolts, one down in here you probably can't see, right there, and another right back there, if you can see those. Those are tough. So they're slotted on top, and the instructions tell you to set the runner in place and then start those bolts and snug them up just enough to hold it in place. What I ran into is that's so tight, there's no way to start that bolt with the runner in place. So since that's slotted on top, I started the bolts on the head first, got the bolts started front and back, and then I was able to slip the runner up from underneath and kind of rock it into place, slide the top in under the bolts, and then it would notch down into place. And that seemed to work pretty well once I got that set. And then, of course, there's bolts under here and here and back there that all need tightened up, and those are a little hard to reach. But got it done. That's in. I got the ECU harness extension on there. The fuel line extension is on and waiting. Everything's zip tied up into place. Shouldn't be going anywhere. It's not touching the steering arm. And yeah, so now the next step is to set the supercharger in place on the runner, get it bolted to the support bracket, and then we can move on from there. Alright, time for another quick update. So we finally got the supercharger set in place. I had to have a buddy of mine come over and give me a hand with that. The instructions tell you to have an assistant help you lift that into place, and I found that to absolutely be true. Biggest challenge we had is, well, for one, you've got to attach crankcase breather hose on the back side of the supercharger before you set it in place. So someone has to hold the supercharger while the other person attaches that hose. So we got that done, and then there's two indexing pegs, front and rear, that the supercharger sets on when it's in the correct position. We were having trouble getting it to sit down on those index pegs, and what we ran into is down underneath the supercharger back here there's a bottom bracket that supports the bottom of the supercharger against the engine block, and that bracket is you're supposed to rotate it towards the alternator here, and when we slid the supercharger in place, that bracket rotated all the way back and was preventing the supercharger from setting into the correct position. So one of us had to get underneath the car and push that bracket forward, and as soon as we did that, then everything just kind of dropped into place and we were able to get the bolts in. So with that out of the way, I can now move on to wrapping up the install. I've got to hook up the heat exchanger tubing, put all the wiring harness connections back in, hook up the water pump electrical connections, and then put the throttle body, airbox, and battery back in. So making progress. Alright, so another quick update. Got the heat exchanger in. So electric water pump mounted here, all the tubing in, and the heat exchanger itself. So everything's routed and run up underneath the car. Got all the tubing, I think, where it's supposed to go. The only thing left is to put some of the convoluted tubing on to protect the water lines, and zip tie some things in place and make sure everything's protected and good to go there. And then I also ran the wiring harness. So there is a relay right here that gets attached to the front of the car, and you have to route some wires. There's the ECU harness and evap solenoid connectors come over here. There's the main battery feed, and of course the ground. So all that's in place. That was pretty straightforward. Oh, and I've got the heat exchanger surge bottle in place. Again, that was pretty straightforward. So yeah, once we got the blower set, then all these smaller parts just kind of dropped right into place. That was all pretty easy. So I'm going to move on from here and start wrapping things up. Okay, time for another update. I noticed the time-lapse camera quit working on me, so I probably missed a good hour or two of time-lapse. So anyway, where we are, I got throttle body in place and the new belt on, new supercharger bracket, and the new idler pulleys in place. So all that went pretty easy. Oh yeah, there's a new bracket that gets mounted to the alternator that holds the wiring harness back from the belt, which is kind of slick, so I don't have to worry about that. Yeah, just plugging away. It's all pretty straightforward from here. Okay, time for another quick update. This is coming together pretty well. Got the, as you can see, got the airbox back in, throttle body connected, mass airflow sensor hooked up, crankcase, let's see, valve cover, breather line is hooked up, fuel line's hooked up. I got the evap solenoid in place, the main ECU's back in, so pretty much everything is done except for dropping in the battery, and I've obviously got to secure a bunch of wires. all along here. Get those zip tied in securely so nothing can move. And then I've still got a little bit of that left to do underneath the car, around the new water lines. Make sure those are secured and protected. Once I get all that done, then I'm going to be ready to start filling the heat exchanger with antifreeze and get that filled up. And then I think I'm really close to being ready for a first start. So hang tight, I'll be back. I'm going to do a little bit more. Okay. Alright, so I got the wiring bundled up, batteries back in place, everything's tucked in, batteries hooked back up. I think everything is secured as best I can get it. I'm pretty happy with how it's run. Everything's tightened up and secured. I've double checked everything. Let's see, got all my hoses are protected and zip tied in place now. So we're down to the last little bit. I had to go through and I trimmed the radiator shroud here, plastic shroud, so that it would fit around the hose. I had to cut a notch here, and I took a little off the end here to clear this hose. So up next, I've got to cut a notch in the end of this piece. I got to notch this corner here for the water pump and cut some off here. I think you lose that hole or that hole. One of those bolt holes goes away to make room for that pipe underneath the car. So this stuff is just kind of like a fiber board. It should cut pretty easy. I'm going to make my marks and take my Dremel tool to it and get that notched out, and then I think that's ready to go back on the car and I can start getting things buttoned up. The only thing I've got left to do is to fill the coolant reservoir with coolant and pump that through, get all the air out of the system, and then I think I'm ready for first start. So fingers crossed here in the next little bit I'm gonna get this thing fired up. Okay, joys of beginner YouTubers. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble with my time-lapse camera, but I missed that section of bolting the undertray on, but nothing major there anyway. I mean, it's just a few bolts on each side and a couple in the middle here to reattach the undertray, so that buttons that up. So all that's left now, I think that does it for the install. Like I mentioned, I've still got to put coolant in, so I'm going to do that next. Get coolant flushed through the system, filled up, and make sure there's no air trapped in the system, and then I think I'm ready for first start. So fingers crossed. All right, let's get some coolant in this thing, huh? So I got my fancy pants nose fills funnel. One of these should fit.
That's too small. No, that's too small. No, that's too big. Well, son of a bitch. All right, I guess we're doing this a redneck way. So much for that. Reading through the instructions, I recommend using a no spill funnel if you don't have a coolant vacuum system, which I don't. So I picked up one of these cheapy funnels on Amazon. It just showed up. Damn thing don't fit. So we'll do it without. Now what do I do with my coolant? Taking any bets on how much of this I spill? There it goes. Moving water, making bubbles. I'll take that all as a good sign. There we go. Alright, supposed to do that a couple times until the electric pump is continuous without any pulsation. Not sure what pulsation sounds like, but I think we're getting close. Put it back right about where it was. Well, I think we're ready to go. So, I'm going to throw the wheels on it, drop it to the ground, and try to fire this up. So, I'll be right back. All right. Here goes nothing. Holy shit. Fired right up. Nothing. No problems. All right, let's go check it. Looks good. Sounds good. That's all good. I think we're good. I was expecting a little bit more drama than that. All right. I think it's time to get this button back up and get her on the road. I can't wait now.
This is awesome.
Thank you. Yes. Hey! Thank you. Yes. Hey! Thank you. Yes. Hey! Thank you. Yes. Hey!
Well, I guess I need to give a little update on where we're at. I got the so the supercharger install is complete. The car seems to be working pretty well. You've heard first start, and since then I did take it for a quick lap around the block, just as a quick test one night, just to see how it was doing, and I found an issue. So yeah, that was interesting. What I found, and I've read of other guys running into the same issue, is the bypass valve on the bottom of the blower in the back here was actually hitting the intercooler hoses that run down the back and underneath the blower, and that was holding the bypass valve open and wasn't letting it build boost, surging. So what I ended up doing, long story short, what I ended up doing was I had to pull the ECU and the battery out and the evap solenoid out of the way. That opened this up just enough for me to get my hand in there, and I was able to move the intercooler hoses back just a smidge, and I was able to get my hand underneath and feel the bypass valve and make sure that there was nothing touching. And it wasn't much. It didn't take much at all for that to happen. So if anybody's considering one of these superchargers for themselves, that might be something to watch out for. I think I've got it. I took it for another quick lap around the block yesterday in the rain, and it was acting much differently, much more like I would expect, to the point where in the rain I couldn't really get any traction until fourth gear, and I've never had that kind of an issue with this car before. So it's definitely making a lot more torque than it used to be. So up next, I'm gonna get this out for a first drive, a first real drive, and give my impressions, and hopefully everything goes well. So stay tuned, I got more coming. Alright, well, that's going to do it on the Edelbrock supercharger install on my Mazda Miata RF. That was quite the project for me. I've never undertaken anything quite that significant before as far as car mods go. So that was a first for me, and I enjoyed it. Looking forward to doing some more of this stuff. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, watching. If you haven't already, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. That would really help me out, keep this channel going. As far as what's coming next, I'm going to get this car out as soon as the rain goes away here and the roads dry out just a little bit. I'm going to get this out and do a real first drive and get that on video and just see what kind of differences I notice in the car. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then I got some other stuff coming, so stay tuned. Thanks.
Hey, there's my needle nose pliers. I've been looking for those.